Welcome back to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. I'm Alice Stockton-Rossini. We have so much great information to share with you on this show. First of all, some ideas on how to connect with your audience through social media, how to avoid scammers after you publish that first book, and proof you can shelve a book you started and come back to finish it a decade or so later. But first, let's talk about AI and writing. Marc Neff is a busy surgeon. He learned during residency sleep is not an option. So now, as part of a healthy hobby he's trying to develop, he fills some of his free time with writing. Now, Marc, your book, Rise of the Shadow Mage, is a fantastical and creative story. And I really find it interesting how you used AI in the writing of this book.
You know, I've been amazed what you can do with AI in today's world, and helps you get ideas out of your brain and onto paper. And that's sort of, how this all started, actually. A really good friend of mine introduced him to his wife, and his wife was a really good friend of mine. He was a friend from high school, she a friend from medical school. He had a massive stroke at age 55 and is now stuck in a nursing home for the rest of his life. And it was one of those things that, was a wake-up call to me, that tomorrow's not promised. And, if I don't start chasing down the things I've always dreamt about or getting the ideas out of my head, I might not get the chance. So, and he's actually the person who, the book is dedicated to. In the beginning of the book, it says to Brian and his family. And, so that led to a 9-month endeavor with some friends where I would come up with an idea. I'd sit down and write. I would use AI to sort of bounce ideas back and forth. I'd send it to my friends. And then we sort of had a schedule. So like Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I'd write. Thursday and Friday, they got it. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they had a chance to read it. By Sunday, I got their comments back, and we did this for like 9 months and put it together.
What'd you come up with? Tell me your story.
So I put a little bit of myself into this. So the idea was a burned out middle-aged mage. Who's, sort of forgotten the fun of going to gatherings of other mages, who sort of, feels like his story is over. And he goes to a convention and, he's sort of excited. He's seeing old students and old colleagues, and he discovers a lost artifact in, midst of, the convention hall. And then there's, of course, a tragic massacre, and most people are killed, and he escapes. And so what he has to do is decide, is his story over, or is he really ready to become the hero again, when he thought he was in the twilight of his life.
And so how much of a role did AI play in this versus your friends and their input?
Well, so it was probably, to give everybody credit, I think it was probably like a quarter AI, a quarter my friends, and probably a half me. It was, driving around, running to see a patient. I'd have an idea and I'd quickly jot it down. It would be sitting at a computer waiting for anesthesia to do what they needed to do, quickly sending something to one of my friends. It would be, late night waiting for a resident to call me back, putting something into AI and getting feedback. AI is in our computers at our hospital, but everybody has like their own AI generator. So like different generators give you different responses. So I'd be like, write me a paragraph about this, or, give me an idea about that, or how does this sound? It's amazing what AI can do in today's world. Like I even took my book and I put it into PDF form, and then I put it into the PDF AI that's built into it now. And I said, give me like an evaluation of my book, and it like spits it out like it's a editor. It's amazing. what it can do. I mean, I've tried the quote unquote ghostwriting, AIs, and I played around with them, and then it's not really like, anything that resembles who you are. Um, so I sort of think of AI today like a power tool. It's not it's not necessarily cut down every tree with an axe, but you got to mind yourself, or, you can do some damage. AI is starting to creep into our medical world too, but it's very interesting. AI used by healthcare professionals, they've actually documented it that it gives different results than AI used by like a lay person who doesn't have any medical experience.
Hmm.
So I was very turned on by a creative writing instructor at Harvard who did an interview about this. And, her comment was, I'm trying to teach my writers how to use it properly, as a skeleton, as a backbone, how to get ideas out there, rather than, to write the stories for them. And I thought, what a wonderful, way to use it in a appropriate fashion.
And it keeps your voice. You're saying it kept your voice because that's the most important thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I was really trying to be careful of that it didn't get carried away. Like there's this AI generator, it's called Designer. I signed up for it, and it's amazing. It can write a whole book for you, but then it's like completely artificial.
Yeah.
It's like saccharine. It's like overly sweet.
Yeah. Will you continue doing this?
Well, so I'd like to. I have ideas for the second and the third book, but my wife has told me that until we get the money back that we spent on the first book for self-publishing it, we're not spending money on the second.
All right. So, how do you propose any thoughts on your own? I know the company does stuff, but I'm always interested to hear what authors might have in mind to get the story out there.
Yeah, so I have a cousin who has a marketing degree from Muhlenberg, and she sat down and she gave me like 10 pages worth of information. And I said, listen, I can't quit my day job, and I only have a little bit of time each day. And she's like, well, then start with TikTok and Instagram and social media. So that's what I've done. I put things on TikTok, and my best TikTok to date, I'm listed under the Mindful Scalpel. That's my name. My best was 9,402 likes. So
That's a start.
it's a start, but I'm now realizing how much, or at least I'm beginning to realize how much I don't know about all this. Like,
Yes.
you want to put it on a billboard, it costs. You want to translate it into a different language, it costs. You want to turn it into another audiobook, it costs. Like, it's great to get my story that I wanted to get out there, and it feels really good to do that. But I realize I'm not quitting my day job anytime soon.
Right. But you know what? I just interviewed a guy who was telling me about Facebook and how he posts little, stories about his characters, little backgrounds about his characters, how he came up with them, who they are, what their life is, what their story is. He asks his followers, what do you like to read? What kinds of stories have influenced your life? What do you remember reading as a kid? So he immediately goes on social media, engages his audience, and then says, well, I just wrote my first book and here's what I have, blah, blah, blah. And he, everybody has like a different way of going about it, but I thought that was an interesting thought. And I mean, obviously you're on the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable podcast. So, people are going to hear the podcast, but that's not the same as your individual, TikTok seems to be a very popular tool. And if you know how to use it, you get some followers, and, hopefully that translates into sales. Go into the local library, go into the local bookstore. If you can make your way into a school and do a reading and talk about your process, that's also a popular thing to do. But it sounds like you're on the right track, and you've got direction from somebody who knows what they're doing, who's not charging you. So, hopefully, I always say to authors, like, it takes a while to become the next Stephen King, but if you can make your money back, that's pretty good.
That's great advice. I appreciate that. Yeah, the research I'm seeing is that most authors, self-published authors, they don't sell more than like 250 books. They sell to their family, friends, and they get like a miniature following. So, I have realistic expectations, although certainly would love to sell this to a movie company and retire. I'll take you, I'll take you with me.
Okay, let's do it. You are Marc Neff, author of Rise of the Shadow Mage, Book One, Shadow Mage series. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Working in IT and corporate management, Daniel Capel took a year off to write books, including The Lost Amulet, part of the Realm Wars series. Now he's back at work, but still exercising his creative brain. Daniel has now published a couple of books. This is his first for Fulton. And as you'll hear, he has developed some effective marketing tools. But first, let's talk about the Realm Wars and the Lost Amulet. So you're definitely let's call it a science fantasy fan.
Yes, I love fantasy. So basically my dad and mom growing up, I got three older sisters, but if the TV was on, it would be Star Wars or Star Trek, or pretty much Star Wars because I'm addicted. If you saw my basement, you'd realize how wow, this guy's a Star Wars nut. But yeah, and then when I got a little older, when the Harry Potter movies came out, I saw the first one and I'm like, oh my gosh, so cool. So then I got addicted to the books, and I've read the Harry Potter books, I would say easily 1,000 times each book because I just love the books. I love the writing. I love the story. And I'm captivated by that. So yeah, definitely big into fantasy and always have been. So
have you always written?
Yeah, I'd say but so I started like at the end of high school. I started writing like short novellas. Just short where you just have 5,000 words or less. And then when my kids were born, or my nieces and nephews were born about 10, 15 years ago, I started reading them books, like books that they would purchase, or their parents would purchase, and I'm like, not that I didn't like the books, but I was like, I could probably write something that would be like more captivating and more, because like humor based and more that would just grab them and it wouldn't draw them out. So I started writing novellas for them, and that's what got me started, writing larger novels. So I've had a few novels that I've published since then over the last 15 years. So,
but The Lost Amulet is your first published book?
Yeah, first published novel. Yeah. So that's my longest book that I've ever written. It's about, 84,000 words.
Whoa.
But definitely my longest by far.
But you have published before? I'm sorry.
Just self-published, just short children's novellas, like just through Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
How did that work out?
Good. Yeah, I've sold quite a few. I've sold like 10,000 copies of my books on there so far over the last couple of years. So things are going okay there.
That's great,
I don't really,
Danny.
Yeah, I don't really do too much marketing for those, but I normally do giveaways. Like I donate books to the local hospital here in Madison, like about 100 books a month. I'll do book donations to them just to give kids that have, cancer or dealing with some, physical ailment. And then I do other donations to other causes around Madison. So that's a lot of the books that I give away, a lot of books as well.
That's great. But The Lost Amulet won for Fulton Books. Why Fulton Books and why this book?
So I never did the query process, where you go through a literary agent. And for this book specifically, I think I dabbled around. Hey, should I do this myself? Should I go the self-published route? And my wife's like, you should probably have a professional company, read through it, edit it, do a nice book cover, get it formatted correctly, and that's kind of the process. And I went through. I think there was like 3 companies I was looking at working with, and Fulton just kind of clicked. I liked the pricing model, and I liked the time frame on when they could get the book, and everything seemed to work out. I like it that it's here in the United States, obviously, so that's important to me. But yeah, and I think they did a pretty good job with the formatting and the editing and getting it all to come together. So
what's the book about?
Yeah, so the Realm Wars is kind of the main title. The Lost Amulet's kind of the secondary title, but the book is about a boy, 14-year-old kid who grows up in Dublin, Ireland. He is different. He's kind of an outcast. He Doesn't have very many friends. He's got his, grandfather Seamus, who's probably, I would say, his best friend, his mom Anna. He never knew who his father was. His grandfather and his mom never talk about him. But his grandfather always talks about, the Celtic legends, like fantasies and leprechaun realms and all these different things that, kind of Ireland, you hear, when you think Ireland, you're like, oh, leprechauns and, those types of things. So basically the book kind of starts where it's, him in Dublin. You learn about the background story of himself, his grandfather, and how his grandfather always presses, you got to keep searching for the rainbow, because at the end of the rainbow is the pot of gold, and that's kind of the magic. Well, basically, there's a prophecy in the realms where a human boy comes and he helps, defeat the Ratel Lord, but Liam is obsessed with weather. He loves seeing storms, but his dream is to obviously reach the end of the rainbow. His grandfather dies previously, so it's just him and his mom. And then one night, the biggest storm in Ireland history comes, and he ends up finding the end of the rainbow, befriending a really, really friendly leprechaun, and then he goes into the realms. So it's basically like if you think like a transport to a different dimension, and then he meets all sorts of magical creatures, leprechauns, goblins, dwarfs, fae, norks. Some things I've made up, like there's some different creatures I've made up, and then some of them are just like Norse mythology and just mythology in general.
Right.
And then in the realms, he learns that there's a prophecy where he's going to be basically one of the few humans that ever come to this realms, and he's going to help protect the realms from the Netherkin, which are basically evil entities, and that are trying to basically, and I would say kill everyone, but take over the realms. So,
how many books in the series?
Right now, it's just the one. I'm actually, I've been writing since I've had some time the last couple of weeks outside of work, with my kids' sports activities kind of weaning up. I'm almost halfway through book 2 now, but I think there's going to be 3. I want to do at least 3. I did write a journal about a separate character from the story, where it's about a 20,000 word journal. Well, it's in first person, so it's him writing his perspective and how he got to the realms, what he experienced, and in first person dialogue. So I did write that. So there probably is going to be like 3 main novels, and then this, a couple like shorts on the outskirts to kind of tie up loose ends and do more character build out, so people can understand more of the specific characters.
You say the other books that you have out there are selling. Any plans for how to get this book out there?
I know I did pay for some marketing through Fulton Books. I do have a pretty large Facebook presence, so I think my Facebook author account has like 100 and I don't know what I'm at right now, 105, 110,000 followers. So I do a lot of posts on there. I do book giveaways for this book. I do some TikTok videos and some YouTube stuff too. So I do some paid advertising, through social media.
And when you talk about your book on Facebook, tell our listeners what you say about your book.
I mean, most of my books I do giveaways. So I'm just like, hey, like whether it's hey, let me know what your favorite book of all time is, and explain to me like why in the comments. Like what's your favorite fantasy book, or what book has captivated you to want to start reading? Like what book as a child where you're like, wow, like this is, and then you've read it over and over again because you just love the book so much, you keep reading it. So I ask those kind of open-ended questions to get feedback from people for then me to understand, like, okay, that's really cool. I see so many different genres of books that people are captivated to, and what got them into reading. So I do kind of things like that. And if I do just a specific marketing call out for the book, I'll just say, I just make a post about like, this is my debut novel. I kind of give a background on the book. I talk about Liam and Lenny and some magical creatures, and then I just talk about the age range. Like, this is perfect for kids 8+, up to adults. And I've had a bunch of adults read it and they love it. So, it's not just, for YA or for juvenile
Right.
fantasy novels. So,
But I think it's interesting. You immediately engage your audience by asking them a question. So you draw them in because I think that's the reason people tune into this podcast is because they want to get ideas on, well, not just the process, but marketing and getting the word out there. And, you've just given some really good ideas, I think, Daniel.
yeah, it's good to get people to think and engage, and then they're like, oh yeah, I forgot. I loved like me personally, I loved reading the Hardy Boys. My mom was a big Nancy Drew fan, so like I read so many mystery novels as a kid. I used to watch Scooby Doo like it was my
Right.
job when I was a child. So like that's what captivated me, and like those are the books that like I just loved as a child, and then I kind of grew into the Harry Potter series, and now I read thrillers and other fantasy novels. But yeah, I think that those questions to your friends and your followers or other people it kind of gets those light bulb moments
Yeah,
going for other
absolutely.
people. So
I'm curious. You're not Irish, right? But you definitely got a strong Ireland connection here.
I am not. Well, I mean, I'm a little. Like, I think I did the 21andMe. I'm like 1% Irish, but so the actual premise of this book started about 3 years ago. So I've got an 8-year-old son, a 6-year-old daughter, and a 2-year-old daughter. And my son, when he was about 3, goes, Dad, how cool would it be if you wrote a book about leprechauns and rainbows? And that's kind of what jostled my mind, was just literally one day when he said that, I started kind of like laying out the plot in my head. I'm like, I could write this, and I think this could be a pretty cool book. And that's kind of what spawned this.
Great. You are Daniel Capel, author of The Lost Amulet. It is part of the Realm Wars series. Thanks so much for talking to me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
I found Gina Russell hiding out in a locker room at work so she could do this interview. Now that's dedication. Gina, you like so many other authors, have always written, but it took a traumatic event to inspire you to finally put together Cowboy Santa Rides with the Magnificent Seven. What was holding you back?
I never had the courage to publish because I never felt like they were anything interesting.
Where'd you get the courage?
My husband, before he died, we hung out together a lot. And when Gary and I would go fishing, and I'd fish for a while, when I would get bored, I would write. And I would just read stories that I would just come up with out of my head and write. And Gary would always say, I think you should, God gave you a gift, and I think you should share it with the world. And I was just always like, you're just being nice. And he's like, no, babe, you should just share it with the world. God, he goes, I think they're amazing stories and people need to hear what you're thinking. And then he suddenly passed away in 2024.
I'm so sorry.
Me too, because he's such a great, fun guy.
How old was he?
Just 53.
Oh, no. Heart?
Yeah, sudden cardiac arrest. He had an arrhythmia, irregular heartbeat. And so that's why I started the book, Cowboy Santa Rides with the Magnificent Seven, actually in 2020 when COVID came out. We were together and everything was on lockdown before I got real busy at the hospital because I was an essential worker. And I'm like, this is a good time just to write. There's, everything's locked down. And he's like, are you going to write a book? I said, well, I'm going to write. He goes, well, write a book. Just write a story. And so I started writing, and then I got busy again at the hospital with the COVID, and just life got busy. And I remember talking to my husband and started the story, Cowboy Santa Rides with the Magnificent Seven. And I made it up to the elf because my husband's in there. He wanted to be the elf. And in my story, that's why the elf is Gur, Gar, short for Gary, because my husband was landscaping tree climber. He was macho, so he wanted a macho name. Because I'm going to do a spinoff eventually about the elf. So that's why it's Gur, because I remember telling him before I set the half written story down. I go, that's not an elf name. He goes, it is if you're macho. Because he could cut wood. We were just very outdoorsy.
Yeah.
So I had set the story aside, and life happened. And then I sold my home, did some packing, and in winter of 2025, because he died in December of 2024, I was unpacking and I came across my story, and I realized I didn't finish it, and I realized I needed to finish it because, I had promised him that it was my last promise, that, I promised him that I would actually be brave and get the courage and start publishing books so the world could, receive my gift that God gave me with my imagination. And so it's the first time I've had to finish something without his support. But when he died and I was trying to finish the book, my family and my friends stepped in as my support. And, they're like, we're going to do it. And then my brother Sergio really stepped in, and he's like, we're going to do it, because he's writing. And he goes, every time I write, you're going to write the story. And so I finished. But
well, good for you. Congratulations.
Yeah,
and here you are, a
you.
published author. So there's not reindeer, they're flying horses.
They are, because I love reading and watching movies. And when I did watch the movie some years ago with the Magnificent Seven that had Denzel Washington in it, I wanted to bridge a gap, something for children. And I remember back in 2020 when I was talking to my husband, because we're country, and I like cowboys. It's like, oh, I'm gonna do a cowboy Santa. And I chose the Magnificent Seven, which I did get the name from the movie. And then, I had to come up with all kind of names for the horses, because I wanted something to relate to children without violence, something magical and fantasy and heartwarming to bridge the gap without violence, but something where young children could enjoy their story for the Magnificent Seven. It's a heartwarming story about Santa and the elf in the North Pole. And this time, Santa wants to deliver toys as a superhero. He doesn't just want to be a regular Santa Claus with reindeer. And this Christmas, he gives Rudolph a vacation at Christmas and the reindeers, and he gets with his elf, which is Elf Gur, his right-hand man. And, he says, let's, write in the night sky to the kids to send letters to the North Pole about their superheroes. And whoever letter we get as a superhero, Santa's like, that's what I'm going to dress up as. And when they received so many letters, and then when the elf Gur did his, his elf dust to pick out a letter out of the sack, they came across a little boy who loved cowboys. And, he would have loved to have his Christmas gifts delivered by a cowboy Santa. So that's how that came to be about. And so Santa had to dress up as cowboy Santa. Well, cowboys got to have horses. And I thought about 6, I thought about 8, and nothing went with cowboy Santa except the Magnificent Seven. It had to be that. And I like the Magnificent Seven name, and I like it because I wanted something heartwarming and gentle for the children. This is for the kids to have their own story of their own Magnificent Seven.
Have you read this story to kids?
I have, just to family, kids with the church. They said they loved it, and they were in all age range. from 8 to 16 years old, even though it doesn't go up to 16. I just wanted to get their input. And I've had my books go out to other parents that, said they love it. And I've been hearing, because it sounds like a nursery rhyme, that even some parents that tell me that when they got the book that it's great for toddlers. And, I didn't think of it that way, but it's short, it's 22 pages. And, they were like, it kind of rhymes, and they said the little people, like the little 4-year-olds, they said they love it. And it's not a long book, because I know, little kids have short attention spans.
Right. So you're going to go all out this year, I guess.
Oh, I'm so hoping so that it gets to be well known by then. I'm also working on the second book to have a sequel to the story. So, but yeah, I want to do some book signings or something. The weather now is getting nice. Summer's coming. So,
what a wonderful tribute to your husband.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. Got to feel great about this.
I do. I do. It does. It feels really good to know that I kept my word, even in his death. And I just never had the courage to go through with any of my stories when Gary was alive. But I feel like it was part of healing. It was part of courage. And it made me feel good to know that I kept my promise. It's like, yes, I will publish. I will know what the world thinks of my stories.
Beautiful, Gina.
Thank you.
You ought to make little Gur dolls, like little Gur elves to hand out with the books.
I want to. I have to find someone to help me do that. Because I get it in my brain, but I don't know how to do it with my hands.
Well, then you will find your way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Start talking to people.
Okay.
Google it.
Okay, yes.
All right, Gina Russell, author of Cowboy Santa Rides with the Magnificent Seven. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
A writer since childhood, Kari Louise Hansen started her book, Watercolors, A Journey of Rediscovery, in her mid-30s. She took a break to start a business and be a mom, and then picked it up again when she retired. How much of this book is based on your real life?
It's based on some truths. I mean, clearly, I have an artistic underpinning, as the main character, Meg, does. And I was also, as a teenager, a victim of date rape. I've had 2 marriages and several crises in my life, and I've had to, through all of it, figure out who I am and who I want to be.
Right. So tell me about Meg Robbins.
Meg is a woman. She's a smart woman, creative woman. She began in her college years thinking that she was going to be a professional artist, and her father discouraged that. Her husband was not supportive of that, and she kind of fell into societal expectations, which took her away from her writing. And it also gave her a safe place to land after having been date raped as a teenager. She is going through life and feeling tugs at herself about wanting to be an artist, trying to share that with her husband. He is not supportive of that. And so she's trying to get on with life, but at the same time feels this continued longing to work on her art. And so through the book, she discovers different people and different experiences that reinforce her desire to be an artist. She tries to work that into her marriage and ultimately finds that it's impossible. And so that's her journey of rediscovery, that she's not the person that everyone thinks she should be. She's the person that she wants to be.
Because her husband isn't receptive, she ends up falling in love with a younger man.
Yes.
And it looks like he's very supportive of her.
Yes, he has similar artistic inklings, but really her mentor in her journey is a person that she randomly met who was supposed to be painting a portrait of her. He's a Vietnam vet and had his own crises in life. And through it all, they share some of their pains and their experiences and their love for art. And he's really the one who draws her into her life of artistry and out of her life of societal norms.
So ultimately, we find out at the end what she's going to do here. Her husband makes her feel safe.
Right.
But yet she's got this creative longing that's supported by this boyfriend, and she has a decision to make.
Yes, and it's a gradual decision. I think that because of the way that she was raised in the society in which she lives and the way her marriage is set up, it's not something you do overnight to decide, well, I'm just going to drop all this and paint instead. It was a gradual process for her, and that's the journey that's in the subtitle of my book.
Do we follow her after this book? Does the journey continue?
Not yet. It's a possibility. It's not what I'm working on currently. I'm currently off in a completely different direction, but Meg is still very much alive in me, and I think about her and what her life might be. And, you know, one of the gifts of the gap in my writing career when I was raising children and running a business, that gap gave me time to really think about characters and character developments and their wants and their needs. And I think if I had sat down and said, okay, I'm going to write 1,000 words a day, I'm going to crank this thing out, but I don't think it would have the nuances that it has currently.
Okay. So what are you doing now?
Well, I'm retired. I write, I garden. I like to travel locally in the Pacific Northwest.
Okay. Well, was this book cathartic for you in any way?
Well, certainly. You know, it was in the very beginning when I first sat down to write it, it was much more cathartic than it became as I picked it up 20 years later. And so it began as a catharsis, but it grew into a story and someone else's life experiences and the characters that they meet along the way and the decisions that they face and the choices that they make.
Okay. Well, one of the things that you're doing right now include talking about your book.
Yes, I hope to see what I can do locally, not just in Olympia, which is where I live, but in the Western Washington and Portland areas. So, yeah, I hope to get out there and sell my book face-to-face, as well as offering signings and speaking opportunities and that sort of thing. One thing I'm going to do, because it's always been a dream of mine since I was about 15, is to see if I can be part of Oprah's book series. And I don't know how much traction I get with that, but having this interview will certainly help.
Great, Kari. Good. I think you give writers, some good insight in that. I think some people feel frustrated. They start a book when they're young and then, get detoured by life. But you're proof that you can come back and pick it up.
I think it actually made my book stronger, really. If I had finished when I was 35, it wouldn't be the same book that it is today. And I don't think it would be as complex or as informed.
Yeah, because you had life experience.
Right.
So you that all comes to the table. So
yes.
Kari Louise Hansen, author of Watercolors, A Journey of Rediscovery. Thanks so much for talking to me today.
Thank you so much for your time, Alice. I appreciate it.
Laura Ancira's family history dates back to when the Americas were made up of distinct nations, tribes, and cultures. She had many stories to tell her nieces and nephews that were set on the family Santa Fe ranch. She shares them now in her book, 10 Dogs, a Borderlands Wild Horse Desert Saga. Now, the genealogy and some of the characters in your book, obviously they existed, but not your main character walks about, correct?
He's totally fictional, but his culture and the people and the way they lived is not.
Tell me about this story, 10 Dogs. It takes place in the 1600s.
And in that part of Mexico, horses didn't really get into the plains and all of that area until after 1680, which was Pueblo Indian revolt up in Santa Fe. So, and in that part of Mexico, which is the lower Rio Grande Valley, they've historically, except for the last 30 years or so, have been run about 50 to 150 years behind the rest of Mexico in their development and colonization. So, the Anciras and the Larraldes and the Garzas and all of those, these are all the founding families there. And all of my relatives are blonde, blue-eyed, green-eyed Mexicans, redheaded. And they'd been in that area for over 300 years. And so around 1990, when I was selling computers, this old Jewish guy called and said, "Well, you're Jewish." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he talked about the last names and the Sephardic Jews to me. So that got me interested. Most of northern Mexico and up all into New Mexico and South Texas was settled by Spanish Jews that were avoiding the Spanish Inquisition in Mexico.
So you've got all of this rich history, and you come up with this story about Walksabout, who comes into contact with the Garza brothers from Monterrey, this Nuevo Leon, who's a Spanish Sephardic Jew, first settlers. He meets 10 dogs.
Yeah, the horse.
Because he's big and strong as 10 dogs.
That's right. And that's a kind of a folkloric thing, that when the Native Americans first encountered horses, they didn't know what they were. And the closest thing to them was that they were like dogs, but they were bigger and stronger than dogs. And so, they would call them big dogs or 7 dogs or this one was 10 dogs.
There's a vision quest, which you always hear about, these vision quests that that Indians go on.
In the story, Walksabout enemy is Capel, the jaguar. Capel was a rain god from the southern Indian areas, but they shared, because there was so much trade between the Indians, they shared stuff in the mythology. And so jaguars were in Tamaulipas along the coast, and they were in South Texas and northern Mexico until they got extirpated by people. And so the Vision Quest stuff happens to be stuff that I experienced on Vision Quest. Like the connection between the light between the hearts and understanding the spiritual lessons that come from it. And the actual spiritual lesson that is in this one really has its origins in an Inca folklore tale about being constantly chased and pursued by your enemy because you're afraid of them. And then you turn around and you realize that the enemy isn't trying to destroy you. The enemy is trying to look at you, because when the enemy looks at you, you see him for what he is, and he knows he exists.
So 10 dogs, it turns out that 10 dogs is Walksabout spirit animal. Yeah. And this puts him on his journey to become a shaman and a peacemaker for his people. And so it doesn't end there, correct?
No, I'm writing a sequel.
So you take us on this journey. So Walksabout basically finds his purpose in life. And in the meantime, you're educating us about the history of this area of the country in the 1600s.
Actually, the kids at the end are on a kind of a pilgrimage with their aunt, who's the anthropologist that tells all these stories. and they go to Lepehuelva, which is where Marcos Alonso, the founder of the family in Mexico. In fact, he's probably the founder of the family because the genealogical record kind of stops there, which is about right. When people started changing their names to be other things besides Jewish identifiers, and some of this happened. It happened in Toledo, but many people still had the house keys. And 350 years later, they go back to their original homes in Toledo, and the keys are still opening the doors.
Oh my gosh.
So that part is kind of true, but I just kind of wove it into the story.
It sounds like you tell these stories pretty often, in terms of marketing your book. You're in an area that's rich in history. I'm sure you have a local bookstore, and we're coming into the tourist season. There must be a local bookstore or library that will let you come and talk. I envision you with a group of children around you just being awed by your extensive knowledge of history, and then this book is just adding to it, and you're writing another book. I mean, I think you're on the right track here.
Well, and the songs that I wrote in the book, Sephardic songs. I have the music and I can play them and sing them, and that's why I think I'd have a great time going to the libraries and stuff and demonstrating the book.
So, well, you're on the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. You can ask for the edited version.
Okay.
It's free of this interview. Send it out to the local library. Send it out to the local bookstore. Here's me talking about my book. You can attach it to an email, an MP3 file. You can use it on your social media and see if you can set some of this stuff up.
Well, the cutest anecdote, there's two little anecdotes that I got. One was when my nephew, Tyler Dean, was little, when I was actually telling the stories. I mean, I told the stories and wrote the book a long time ago. Tyler Dean's now a young man. But he would go and tell his mother, Mom, don't trim the mesquite trees because the Indians need to go by there and get the mesquite beans to eat, and they won't be able to eat if you trim the mesquite trees.
I love that.
And then he would go into his first grade class and he'd start talking about these stories about 10 dogs this and 10 dogs that, so much so that the teacher called up my sister and said, who is 10 dogs? Because all the other kids were going like, yeah, okay. They'd never heard of him. So...
All right, Laura, before I let you go, I think we have to mention that first-time authors can sometimes become an easy target for scammers and people offering to help market your book. And unfortunately, you were one of them.
But then, there were things that I missed. Like, they would have like Amazon acquisitions.outlet.com. Wait a minute. Amazon has its own domain names, or Gmail accounts, or and I just got duped. And they were they were calling me, each one of these people. I mean, there was like 10 companies that I was kind of farming different tasks out to, and they were calling me 10, 15, 20 times a day. And I just like had a relapse of, I don't know what kind of autoimmune stuff I got going, and I just got sick. Literally. And so I'm, that's why I haven't been responding to any calls. Who are you?
I know. That's why you weren't picking up my call, but I finally got to you. I'm sorry you lost any money, but you did say that you've gotten about a third of it back. So that's good. I just want to impress upon our listeners, if anyone calls offering to market your book in any way, shape, or form, call your publisher, call Fulton, call Page, call your coordinator. They'll help you out.
They have been they followed through with everything exactly the way they said they were going to do it. They communicated with me well. They did an excellent job. I love my cover design, and I just sort of hit a wall. I just hit a wall on. I mean, I used to sell. I can sell, but I don't know anything about marketing. I don't know. You'd think somebody who knows how to sell stuff.
I hear ya. And that's one of the reasons the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable podcast exists, to help authors figure out marketing, share ideas from and with other authors. So, hopefully our listeners will learn something from this, Laura. Thank you so much. Laura Ancira, author of 10 Dogs, a Borderlands Wild Horse Desert Saga.
All right. Thank you.
All right, and last but not least, the president of a manufacturing company, Marc Nemeth, has a way with words. So much so, his youngest daughter and future president of the company started writing them down. Now, a lot of these observations turn out to be just good business sense, and you can find them in Marc's book entitled Marcisms.
I'm coming back from a business trip, and my daughter and a young engineer have a flip chart outside my office with 5 things that I frequently say at work. I guess they internalize them with all the other stuff I've been saying, and they highlighted it, saying basically a message to me saying that we're listening and it makes sense, we like it. And I looked at them, I looked at the sayings a number of times, they're getting uncomfortable, and I say, oh, there's a whole lot more of those. So that I started writing them down, and I was hoping to get to a point where I would have all my ideas and my experiences documented, and because it was initially going to be a legacy for my kids, because whatever I've written, they wouldn't read them until I probably no longer around. And what happened? I kept writing, and I got up to 124. And when I was somewhere over 50, I realized that this is sort of a good basis for a book. So I got up to considerably over 100, and there was about 8,000 words. And I realized that every one of these that I written down came from an experience I had. And most of my memory is pretty good when I make a mistake, not so good when I do a good thing. So I fleshed them out, and the book ended up somewhere over 30,000 words, probably a little over 31. And it turned into a bucket list thing saying, hey, I put this stuff down. It's an experience in life. Let me have the experience of publishing a book. And so I've accomplished the publishing, checking off a bucket list thing. And, it's a legacy for my kids.
So you not only write the Marcisms, but you explain the story behind the Marcism.
Yeah.
So give me an example.
Well, I can give you a whole bunch of examples. One is treat a family business as a business, or you won't have either.
That is so true.
Yeah, well, of course it's true. And I've explained certain experiences I've had watching family businesses self-destruct with arguments over Thanksgiving dinners. And then I've talked about the most, when I talk to the reader, they're going through the markets and say, pay attention to this one. And it's really about actualizing the potential of people that are working with you, the employees, the associates, whatever you want to say, is if you can tap into their capabilities fully, where they buy into your vision, you're going to be very successful, and you're going to have 100 set of eyes watching things that if you didn't do that, you would have to watch. And so if you can, people want to be involved in something bigger and better than them. They want to have a second home, if you will. They want to have a mission in life, and you have an opportunity to give it to them by the way you run your business. I talk about the auction, the process of the auction, how the auctioneers are a great judge and observer of human beings, and you can be played. Understand you got to go there and find what you're looking for, and not be played there. I talk about being a partner with your customers and searching out customers who want to be partners. If it's adversarial relationship, that doesn't fly. I talk about needing a rich uncle when you're a small business, and if you don't have capital to back you up, you are in a very, very tenuous position. I talk about banks, how to work with banks. The banks claim that they're going to align with your mission and goals, and they never do that. And the things to focus on are not the interest rate that they're going to give you, but the covenants, and that will tell you if they're going to align with what you're trying to do. Most businesses run on quarterly results, and even Trump and Obama, both of them decry that. I don't know if they're ever going to do it, but the fact of the matter is we look at things much longer term. I look at it as forever environment, and it's building relationships. It's not I call it turning tricks, where you get business. If you're in a commodity business, you send your salespeople out and they got to turn trick to get a order. We don't do that. We develop relationships, and it's a 20-year process for when we get involved with a major company. Before we become, it takes 20 years before we become their go-to seal elastomeric supplier. Now, I'm not saying that we put anyone out of business. No, we're just the one that they can go to get a. We solve their problems.
Well, they feel good and they trust
Right.
you. They trust you.
Well, it takes a long time to get
Sure.
there, and there's a natural bias against small businesses because there's too much risk. But you have to perform, and you have to be there when they need you. And the whole idea is to get close enough to your customers to know what their problems are, and you solve their problems.
So where do you go from here with this book?
Yeah, well, yeah. What I signed up for with Page Publishing, they had like a Chinese menu of options, and as I said, this is like an experience for me. So I signed up for the all this the bells and whistles, and they're doing the marketing,
Okay.
and I'll have to see that how that goes before I get involved with anything more. I get an awful lot of calls from people who. They want to reach in my pocket.
Oh, yeah.
That's a little premature right now to do that. But then the local library said we want to have a book signing, and I gave them a couple copies of it. And the people that asked me that said, "Well, your book has a very limited audience." And true or not true, yeah, it's really geared for people who don't want to make all the mistakes in business. Have a look at the world that's different than what they teach you in business school.
Yeah.
So, I don't care if I sell 2 books, 200 or 20,000 books. It's not going to change anything in my life. Now, if let's say a college says, we're looking to promote small business, and we found this thing is a very, very valuable resource, blah, blah, blah. So if they bought a couple hundred books, that's fine. If they said, hey, you can come in and be lecture once in a while, that'd be fine too. But as I said, it's a bucket list thing. I'm happy about it. I like it, and I'll see how it plays out.
All right, Marc Nemeth, author of Marcisms. Thanks so much for talking to me today.
All righty.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We hope to see you back here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.